I've been in your waters. I know I can for sure. I've never been so close before. It's one way or the other.
Hi everyone, James here and welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be talking about barbecue shacks. So if you've been following along with the channel, you'll know I've had my shack for a few years now, so I thought if you guys are wanting to build your own, there's probably some advice I can share and talk about how I planned mine and actually brought it all together. So if this is something you want to do this year, stick around because hopefully this video is going to help you out and just get a clearer idea in your head of what you might want to think about whenever you're designing your shack. So the first step is all about planning and thinking about what exactly you want from a shack. Now there's certain things that are probably must-haves and there's certain things that are probably like-to-haves. So start by listing out those must-haves. For example, if you cook on a pellet cooker, then you're going to need power into the shack. Figure out how that's going to work out. If you're planning on doing nighttime cooks, you're going to need some kind of lighting in there. Do you have access to other storage, or is your shack going to be somewhere where you need to keep all of your gear? So those are things that you're going to have to answer to really decide what has to go into your shack, and those are the things you can't really compromise on. So if you've nowhere else to keep your barbecue gear, you need to make sure your shack has good storage in it. Then you can list out the things that would be nice to have. So you would ideally like to have all of your barbecues underneath the one shack, so in which case you're going to need quite a big shack. Maybe you'd like a fridge out there, maybe you would like a 60-inch widescreen TV up on the wall. Maybe you want a sink with running water in it. Those are all things that you could probably live without, but it would be nice to have them on hand. So whenever you're planning out your shack and your budget, you can say these are the things I need to cater for first. If there's anything left over at the end of it, then we can look at the 60-inch flat screen TV on the wall. The next thing then is to look at your backyard space and decide where the best place for your shack is going to be. Now, it might not necessarily be where all your grills are set up at the minute, and sometimes you're kind of limited to where you can go, but even this shack here was originally supposed to run, okay, it's running this way at the minute. It was supposed to turn around and go this way, but looking at the yard and not wanting to close off the yard so much, I actually turned it this way, and it kind of, the shack's a little bit bigger than I would have had it this way, but it worked far better twisting that around. So measure it out on the ground. If you have to, mark it out, then think about what you want to have in it. Now, I again ideally would have loved to have all my barbecues under one shack, but that would have involved putting a roof over the entire yard, which isn't feasible. So I compromised and thought I want a decent amount of workspace in here, so these counters and stuff, but I'm only ever really cooking on one barbecue at a time, maybe two. So as long as there was enough room to pull one barbecue in whenever I was using it, they're all movable enough, apart from the WSM. I can pull it in, I can pull one or two in at a time and use them, and it still gives me enough space for workbenches, etc. So mark out the space in the ground, pull your barbecues into that space and see how it works for you. As I said, having a prep area was more important to me than having 3 or 4 grills underneath the shack at a time, because my shack's tiny. I think it's about 8 foot by 5.5, 6 foot. So if I was to have 3 barbecues in here, I couldn't have this back workbench. I couldn't really have this front workbench either. It would have been a little small work area, and to be honest, I get more use out of the workbench than I do out of having extra barbecues in here that I'm likely not using all at the one time. The other factor to take into account then is, if you have 2 or 3 barbecues in here, does that still leave you enough room for the storage you need? Now originally, if you remember way back when I started this channel, there was originally a shed sitting here, and this is where I stored all of my barbecue equipment. To put the shack in, I had to get rid of the shed, so most of my stuff needs to be stored in here. I still have a shed around the side, but there's not as much room in it, and I can store bits and pieces in there, but I need it to have enough storage in the walls and the shelves and under benches to hold most of my gear. Okay, the next thing to consider then is the materials you're going to use. Now I'm assuming most of you will be building it out of wood. It's quite an easy material to work with. If you're planning ultra modern metal and glass construction, then this might not be the video for you. But you want to choose your materials wisely and cheaply. So I'd highly recommend considering recycled or reclaimed wood. Now most of mine is cladded with pallet wood. So it's pallet boards are stripped off the top of pallets, and as you know, all my worktops are made with old scaffolding boards. Now pallet wood has become quite trendy in recent years, and if you Google it, pallet wood for sale, some people are charging extraordinary amounts for pallet wood that they've ripped off pallets. The reason for that is it takes a lot of work to get them off, but if you want them already stripped and the nails took out of them, then you're going to end up paying quite a lot more for it. So I would recommend go around some of your local businesses. Generally they will have to pay people to come and take the wood away, so usually they're more than happy to give them to you. To do my entire shack it took I think around 30 or 35 pallets. Now there's some pallets you'll get that are super hard to get apart, and out of the 10 boards on top of them you might get 3 usable boards, so you just need to be prepared for that. But you can do it over time and gather up those boards until you have enough to do what you need to do. Same with the scaffolding boards. You can go to builders yards, they will likely have scaffolding boards that are gone past the point of being able to be used for scaffolding, so the ends tend to rot on them a little bit. But if you're using them to cut up for benches, you can take the rotten ends off, sand them all down, and they're perfectly good to use. I'm pretty sure you can find old scaffolding boards out there for 2 or 3 quid for a full plank, which is a bargain considering how sturdy they are and how well they make shelves and worktops. Now this might be a good time to talk about the roof, because I'm not sure if you can hear it. So one of my main goals for my shack was to be able to use it to make these videos, so I had to go for a clear roof. If I put a solid roof on here it would just be too dark to actually shoot a video in, so that means I had to use the polycarbonate for the roof. It's great for letting light through, but it is terrible when it is raining. The noise that comes off it is unreal. So you need to think about what you're going to use as your roof material. If you're not wanting to listen to the incessant tinkling of rain off the roof, then you might want to go with a more sort of wood felt construction and even double skin it to try and cut down some of that noise. For me, I needed the light, so I had to compromise on that. Now, the next thing to consider is really depending on where you live. If you live way down south of England or somewhere where it's nice and warm, then just skip on to 0.5. But I live in Northern Ireland, it's freezing. It is currently freezing and raining and windy, it's awful. And the one thing I didn't bank on was cooking through the winter. Yes, I'm kept nice and dry, but it gets cold out here. So if you're wanting to barbecue in comfort, I would look at some form of heating. So whether you put heat lamps up, again I looked retrospectively at heat lamps, I don't think they're going to work with my roof. I have a little like chimney kind of thing I've got, but again I can't really have that lit under here. Plastic roof and fire doesn't go very well. That being said, the barbecues are fine. I've had them all at their highest temperature possible and they've never had the roof doesn't heat up. But I think with a proper open fire going, then I'm just asking for trouble. So think about whether you can put curtains onto the side or something to block out some of that wind or keep you a little bit warmer. But if you're somewhere cold, it's something that you're going to have to deal with. I just have to put on an extra layer and suck it up. Another part of comfort might be ventilation. You need to think of that. Now my shack is fully open on 2 sides. It's got the sloped roof. The barbecue sits off to the side anyway, so generally all the smoke will go up and out. But if you're doing something that's a little bit more enclosed, just make sure you have raindrop on my lens. The struggles. Yeah, so ventilation, you want to make sure there is enough open air that the smoke can get up and out. You do not want to finish your shack build and then realise that it's unusable because the smoke has nowhere to go. And the final thing you want to consider then is storage. How are you going to store all your gear? you want to make full use of your walls, so you can put shelves up on them, you can use rails just like this one, use them to hang your tools and stuff on, your cast iron pans, you can hang them up, different accessories. You also need to consider then whether your shack is going to be completely weather sealed. So mine is obviously quite open, so sometimes the rain will blow into the front part of it, so I don't store a lot under this bench. But the back, I have them big like plastic storage tubs where I store things in. Not the prettiest looking, but they keep everything dry and they are weather tight. The other thing to remember is that you are effectively storing it outside, so if you don't want little critters running all over it, you want to have it inside something. So when you're planning out workbenches or your walls, think about what shelving you can put up. If you can have storage underneath your benches, having more options to store stuff is definitely going to make your life easier in the long run. So I'll leave a link in the description to an article on my website where I sort of break down how I built this shack. There's some sort of step-by-step photos and stuff in there of it going together. I also give an idea of what materials I used and how much it all costs to put together. Really, something like this shouldn't cost you any more than £200-300. It just depends what materials you're putting into it. Again, using scaffolding boards, putting a bit of work in and stripping your own pallets is really going to save you a lot of money in the long run. The most expensive part of my shack was the roof. Most of the rest of it was sort of offcuts of timber that I just put together, sanded them down and painted them, and you could never tell. So if you're planning a shack build this year, remember and tag me in your photos, or if you have any questions before you get started, leave them in the comments below, I'll happily answer them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.